Those who are ignorant insist that our minds have been distorted to think in ways benefiting our oppressors by a silly slave syndrome myth. Whenever people are kept ignorant from learning the truth, they'll always believe nonsense. What if I told you that the white ruling class loves it when we believe that our minds are being controlled by a silly Willie Lynch slave syndrome myth? They love it because it prevents us from learning the truth of our plight and condition. You see, as long as our understandings of our plight and condition remains flawed, then all of our liberating remedies and strategies that stem from those misunderstandings will also be flawed. When we believe in the Willie Lynch myth, this benefits our oppressors because it keeps us from learning the truth that is necessary in order to develop the proper counter strategies that are required to truly liberate ourselves. The truth of our current plight and condition begins with the Tavistock Institute of Human Behavior. The organization was established during the 1940s. Its name has since been changed to now it's called the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations because this current title sounds less alarming. They describe themselves now as an institute that brings together social scientists, researchers, psychologists, and political analysts and other contemporary thinkers to steer society towards a better future. They claim that their staff uses social science methods to address societal problems. Logically, a group that specializes in shaping public perceptions would create a new title and bio for themselves that garners a more favorable public response. However, the truth is that the Tavistock Institute of Human Behavior is the largest mass manipulation organization in the world. It is the world's center for mass brainwashing and social engineering activities. It was at the Tavistock Institute that the ruling elites developed the methods for manipulating the minds of the masses to fit the objectives of the ruling class. Most of the mass manipulation propaganda campaign tactics that are presently being used for shaping and controlling large-scale populations were originally developed by the Tavistock Institution. It is a sophisticated organization that shapes the destiny of the entire planet in ways beneficial to the Western society. From its British origins to connections throughout Europe and throughout the U.S. Research institutions and think tanks, the Tavistock Institute has a large global reach. It was among the members of the Tavistock Institutes where it was first stated that those who controls the mainstream media controls the brainstem of the society. Because people's behaviors aligns with the information that they repetitively receive through the media. This is because the definition of values by which people operate are greatly influenced by the mainstream media. Social norms promoted by the media can influence the way of thinking and the cognitive map of a populated audience. Because perceptions created by the media leads to non-deliberate thoughtful decision-making or decisions below the level of consciousness. It has been called thinking without actually thinking, and it ultimately leads to unconscious similar behaviors. People are like computers. All you have to do is keep giving them certain information every so often, and you can persuade and or steer an entire population towards an applied objective. It doesn't matter if the information presented in the media is true or not. Most people will respond accordingly to the information because they've all been given the same disinformation. During the 1960s unprecedented unified black protests, it was determined that the U.S. Negro problem was precisely the type of social issue that the Tavistock Institute was created to address. You see, during the 1960s, African Americans' unified protest against the U.S. system of white supremacy was unprecedented. African Americans confronted it on all fronts. It was confronted through civil disobedience tactics, militant means, nonviolent protests, and with black lawyers pleading for equality within America's highest Supreme Court. African Americans' unified protest still remains unrivaled by any other group in U.S. history. African Americans had unknowingly proven themselves as being the greatest threat against the U.S. system of white supremacy. White social scientists that were hired by the Kerner Commission in 1967 to thoroughly study the African American population also determined then that while the white society, through its weaponry advantage of guns, rifles, cannons, and explosives, were able to invade and enslave Africans, they, however, cannot maintain peace with us indefinitely, because whenever people have been oppressed for long durations, their collective aggressions towards their oppressors will continue to grow until acts of massive retribution against their oppressors becomes inevitable. The oppressed always eventually rebels against their oppressors. It's an inherent response within the collective human psyche whenever people are held under long-term oppression. This was the core aggravating factor for the 1960s unprecedented unified black protest against the white establishment. The only way to prevent this inherent response from happening is by shifting the collective aggressions of the oppressed away from their oppressors and redirected it towards and against themselves. It was logically determined that this could be done to the black population. It was necessary. The white ruling class therefore determined that this situation among the African American population, which was then called the U.S. Negro problem, was precisely the type of social issue that the mass manipulation tactics developed by the Tavistock Institute was created to address. The white ruling class then started deploying fraudulent propaganda campaigns against the black population. Presently, the white media's unrelenting negative depiction of the black population that amplifies the negative to the point that it distorts reality is much more than just biased media reporting. It is actually a black racially demoralizing divide and rule psychological warfare campaign. Demoralized divide and rule is the method of maintaining control over a targeted population through constant and unrelenting demoralization in order to create self-hate and division amongst the targeted population. It also makes the targeted population more compliant with their oppressor's dominance over their lives. People are easily controlled by the narratives that they repetitively receive about themselves. If people are constantly inundated with positive narratives about themselves, this raises their collective self-esteem and it unifies them. However, if people are constantly bombarded with fraudulent negative narratives about themselves, the exact opposite happens. This demoralizes them, divides them, and it shifts their collective aggressions away from their oppressors and redirects it against themselves. It also creates self-hatred and disunity, which attacks the core foundation of what bonds them as a people. Remove a people's self-love and unity, and they can then be ruled over forever. This demoralizing process is precisely what white oppressive forces are currently doing to the black population. And it's so obvious that it's only by not critically thinking that it cannot be seen. For when critically thinking, it becomes obvious to see just how cartoonishly unrealistic it actually is, that virtually all information that the black population receives about ourselves from white sources are consistently negative and black racially demoralizing. It is actually fraudulent propaganda. Keeping us believing the fraudulent worst narratives about ourselves is how the white society now prevents us from unifying ourselves against them. This nefarious psychological warfare tactic works by tapping into the immense power that shame has upon the human mind to mentally enslave millions of black people. This system is deployed like a massive media marketing campaign that constantly subjects the Black population to receiving only the fraudulent worst narratives about ourselves. Within this system, fraudulent Black racially demoralizing propaganda is being pumped unrelentingly into the unsuspecting minds of the Black population without being challenged nor counterbalanced by an equal amount of Black positive racially affirming information. This conveys a subliminal message that Black people are now our own worst enemies and that we therefore need the white society to govern over our lives. Moreover, that Black people should admire, respect, and trust only whites. The human mind is like a computer. No matter how efficient it may be, if it's possible to control what's fed into the minds, it's entirely possible to control what people will believe. It's also possible to steer an entire generation of people towards an implied objective. There are 4 ways to effectively manipulate the human mind: by what we're taught, by what we see, by what we hear, and through repetition. Because the white society controls the education that we're taught, the media image that we see, and the societal narratives that we repetitively hear, they've exploited these factors to create a psychological prison for our minds. More specifically, they exploited this scenario to indoctrinate Black self-contemptuous and divisive thoughts into the collective minds of the Black masses without most of us even realizing it. This system is extremely effective because when Black people are repetitively presented these negative narratives about ourselves from trusted white sources, it can be very difficult to resist its implied propaganda programming, especially when the propaganda is being told daily and so unrelentingly. Its weapon is the demoralizing message that it carries and the way that it adversely affects the Black population in terms of our behavior. No group can be subjected to receiving only negative information about themselves and not be adversely affected. With time, being unable to refute the constant negative information about ourselves, many Black people eventually internalizes it and accepts it. Many Black people then, they experience profound feelings of humiliation, and we even ask ourselves, why can't we get our act together? This unrelenting humiliation and demoralization causes many Black people to become profoundly demoralized, divided, self-loathing, and we become resentful towards our own people. In the most extreme cases, many will even attempt to disassociate ourselves from other Black people. Psychologists call this disassociation. It's a defense mechanism that evolves to put a distance between oneself and the pain associated with being Black. Some will even make it their personal mission to go out of their way to try to show white people that we're not all bad. Many works all try to win the approval of the white society. This system of control prevents Black unified protests by lowering the collective self-esteem of the Black population, by eroding our unity, and by shifting Black collective aggressions away from the white society and redirecting it towards ourselves. This is the truth of our plight and condition. This is all possible because people are like computers. All you have to do is keep giving them certain information every so often, and you can persuade an entire generation towards an applied objective. It doesn't matter if the information presented is untrue. Most Black people will act accordingly to the information because they've all been given the same disinformation about ourselves. Those Black people who insist that they've confirmed their negative assessments about our racial group based upon their own experiences are in fact delusional, because it's not humanly possible to accurately assess the collective state of millions of people based upon anyone's individual experiences. It's not humanly possible. The reason why many Black people now insist that they've confirmed their negative assessments based upon their own experiences, although they've in fact not, is because once false beliefs have been successfully embedded into the human mind, people will then only notice those incidents that appears to confirm the belief, and they'll become psychologically blinded, from noticing the greater amount of evidence that refutes the embedded belief. Then, based upon this psychological blindness, they will insist that they've confirmed it. It's what's called the illusionary truth effect. Okay? And then, based upon this psychological blindness, the person will insist that he or she has confirmed the belief, although they've in fact not. White social scientists have created a very sophisticated prison for our minds. And those black people who don't critically think never notices their mental change. White social scientists describe what they've done to the black masses as merely instilling a value system into the collective minds of the black masses that makes us adhere to the authority and the existing infrastructure of the white dominant society. It's how the white ruling class now prevents massive black unified retribution against the white society, given the white society's long history of mentally enslaving, of abusing the black population. And those black people who don't critically think never notices their mental change. It is time to wake up to our reality. The time of believing in idiotic beliefs are over. This is the truth of our plight and condition. And because they socialize us to put more value in being holy rather than being critical thinkers, we are therefore easy victims for their mass manipulation tactics. The truth is here, and it's time to wake up to our reality. One love and peace.